Welcome back to Today. This morning, experts are warning against a growing super trend that could be costing Aussies over $50,000 in their retirement.
Welcome back. Aussie super accounts are facing fresh risks heading into the new year, with market uncertainty and policy pressure expected to impact our retirement.
We didn't ask to get old and go on the age pension.
I'm not going to have anything to leave the kids because I've got to save to finance our, start all literally from the ground up, start all over again. I've never felt more alone in a huge battle. I would hate to think that anyone else gets scammed the way that I did.
You have spent 40 years putting money into your super, and you have been told it is yours. It is not in the way you think. If you die with $1 million in super and it goes to your adult son or your adult daughter, the tax office takes about $170,000 of it before they see a cent. Your house is in your will. Your super is not. It sits in a trust, and a stranger at your fund decides who gets it. And the part almost nobody has been told is that the tax is the smaller of your two problems.
He says it should deliver income that's aimed at stopping super becoming a tax haven or somewhere for rich people to do estate planning for their kids. He says it should deliver a dignified retirement.
Estate planning for their kids. That is the phrase the government uses when it explains why super is not supposed to be an inheritance vehicle, and it is worth holding on to, because the rule written to stop the very wealthy sheltering money is the same rule that reaches into a plumber's account in Bendigo. Here is how it works on your money. Your super balance is made of two parts: a tax-free component, which is the money you put in after tax yourself, and a taxable component, which is everything your employer paid in, everything you salary sacrificed, and every dollar those contributions earned over your working life. For most Australians, the taxable component is almost the whole balance, because most Australians never made a large after-tax contribution. They just worked. When you die, that taxable component is tax-free if it goes to your spouse, or to a child under 18, or to someone who genuinely depended on you for money. If it goes to an adult child who has a job and a house of their own, it is taxed at 15% plus the 2% Medicare levy. 17% off the top before the money moves. The accounting firm Pitcher Partners sets it out with a man they call John, who dies with $1 million in super that is entirely taxable component, and a 35-year-old son called Sam. Sam is not a dependent. The tax on that death benefit is $170,000. $170,000 out of a balance a nurse or a fitter could realistically reach. Listen to what the country was actually being told about super and tax while that sat there.
The second change is to introduce two thresholds for the better targeted superannuation tax concessions. The first threshold is $3 million. The second threshold is $10 million.
Notice what that announcement was about. $3 million. $10 million, 90,000 Australians on one side of a line and 8,000 on the other, out of a country of 27 million people. That is the conversation the country has been having about super and tax for 3 years, and while it was happening, the tax that actually hits ordinary families sat there untouched and unmentioned, because it is not new and nobody announces it. Grant Thornton, another accounting firm, published a worked example that is closer to most people's lives than a $10 million balance. A woman they call Anne, aged 78, widowed, with $1.3 million in her super. She wants it split between her two adult children. The tax-free part passes to them clean. The taxable part costs them $187,000 in tax. And here is the part that should make your blood boil. If Anne's husband had still been alive, the same money would have passed to him with no tax at all. Same balance, same fund, same 40 years of work. The only thing that changed is which family member was still standing. Listen to how a tax expert reads the message the government was sending with those new thresholds.
The $10 million threshold that the government has introduced, above which there will be a 40% tax, sends a very strong signal that the government does not want you to have more than $10 million in your superannuation fund.
Very strong signal about what the government does not want you to have. That is the whole public argument, and it is about the top half of 1%. Nobody sent a signal about the other rule, the one that follows a rule and takes 17% from everybody else. And what happens next does not follow a rule at all. Your superannuation does not automatically form part of your estate. It is held in a trust managed by your fund's trustee, and your will has no authority over it. You can write your children's names into that will in front of a solicitor, sign it, witness it, lodge it, and your super fund is entitled to read it, note it, and pay the money to somebody else. The only instruction a fund is legally required to follow is something called a binding death benefit nomination. Research from Super Consumers Australia, published by the ABC this month, estimates that about 15.7 million Australians do not have one. That is out of roughly 18 million people with a super account. 87% of the 5,000 people they surveyed could not report having one. And here is where you might switch off, because you have a will and you think that covers it. So let me point it at you directly. The person in this story is not a different kind of Australian. They did the same thing you did. They filled in the form the fund put in front of them online, the quick one, the one that takes 90 seconds and does not need a witness. That form is called a non-binding nomination, and in the moment that matters, it is a suggestion. Your fund can read it and set it aside. Listen to a money expert on how little any of us actually know about the biggest asset most of us own.
The fact that this is the third biggest mistake that consumers make, that they don't know what to do with their money when they retire, just shows we don't know enough about super. So we've got to kind of lift our game on that.
Do not know enough about super. That is the industry's own explanation, and it is half true. The other half is that the binding form is not the one your fund puts in front of you. To make a binding nomination at most funds, you cannot do it online. You print a paper form. You sign it in wet ink in front of 2 witnesses who are over 18 and are not named as beneficiaries. Both of them sign it too. Then you post it. And at most funds, that document expires after 3 years, at which point the whole exercise starts again. And if you have moved house, or you are unwell, or your husband has just died, it lapses quietly, and you are back to the fund deciding. Super consumers put a simple question to 5,000 Australians, and the ABC published the answers this month. In the past 12 months, has your super fund encouraged you to make a legally binding nomination? 67% said no, 10% said yes, 10% could not remember, and 13% said they already had one. The regulator looked at the same behaviour and found that most funds contacted a member only once before the nomination expired, and that some sent the notice 1 day before it lapsed. Listen to Andrew Holmes, a Townsville father whose superannuation was rolled out of his fund by scammers, on what he thinks a fund owes the people whose money it holds.
I think that super funds should have obligations to ensure that any rollover is done in accordance with their customers' instructions and there isn't fraudulent activity. We should expect better of super funds.
We should expect better of super funds. Hold that sentence against what happened to a woman named Brooke Allen. Her uncle raised her like a father. he wrote her name and her cousin's name on the death benefit nomination form at his fund, Cbus, in 2019, splitting his super between them, 50-50. He died. In February 2024, the two of them lodged their claim. Then came repeated phone calls, emails, statutory declarations, and several different case managers. The decision letter arrived on the 23rd of April 2025, 14 months later. The nomination was not legally binding. The fund exercised its discretion, identified his estranged son as the only person who met the legal definition of a dependent, and paid him the entire $130,000. Cbus acted within the law. Brooke Allen received nothing, and her uncle's written instruction, signed and lodged with his own fund, counted for nothing. Her words afterwards were the ones that stay with you. Why do we bother nominating anyone? And why do we bother putting our wishes down if these companies are not going to abide by them? And while a fund takes 14 months to decide, somebody is living on whatever is left. Listen to an older Australian describe an ordinary week without it.
And you can't say to the children, come down, I'm going to cook a roast because meat is expensive. You think twice of getting a prescription filled now.
It is the life the money was supposed to prevent. And it is worth remembering while we talk about how long the funds take. Because the delay is not an occasional failure. In March 2025, the corporate regulator sued AustralianSuper, the largest fund in the country, alleging that between July 2019 and October 2024, it took between 4 months and 4 years to assess at least 6,897 death benefit claims, and failed to pay at least 752 members' benefits as soon as practicable after death. 8 months earlier, the regulator had gone after Cbus. In November 2025, the federal court ordered the Cbus trustee to pay a penalty of $23.5 million over delays affecting more than 7,000 Australians. The court heard that across a 5-week stretch in 2023, between 48 and 56% of all death claims at that fund had been sitting open for more than 365 days, roughly half, for over a year. The penalty was more than the trustee's entire revenue for the year. On top of it, the fund had to run a remediation program of about $32 million for 7,402 affected people, none of which reaches the person still waiting. Listen to what waiting looks like when the pension is all there is.
Her medication for diabetes alone costs $60 a month. Increasingly, she finds that it's cheaper to just stay home.
If you stay home, you don't spend anything. And I'm wondering how many other people are locked in their house.
The ABC put a name to what that does to a family. Kathy Clark waited for her brother Craig's super. The balance was about $11,000. She went to her solicitor about it in February 2023. She was asked for paperwork again and again, and was told at one point that the fund had misplaced documents she had already sent and would need them resent. The beneficiaries were finally paid in March 2024. 12 months after that, a letter arrived offering compensation for the delay. $28.99 to be divided between 3 people, under $9.67 each for a year of it. Here is the bit that really stings, and it comes from the regulator's own case files rather than from anybody's complaint. Reporting on that review, SBS News set out what the regulator's reviewers found inside real claim files at 10 large trustees, together holding 38% of all the money managed by super funds in this country. In more than 3/4 of the delayed claims they examined, the delay was caused by something inside the fund's own control. Not a difficult family, not a missing document, the fund. They found poor customer service in 27% of the files they read, calls not returned, queries from grieving relatives dismissed, unreasonable information demanded. They recorded a grieving widow made to lodge the same documents over and over before she was finally paid $600,000, and an elderly man who had lost his wife to cancer and needed the money to cover a mortgage held up 28 days for no good reason. And they recorded one case in which a First Nations woman whose husband had died waited more than 500 days to be paid about $100,000, while the fund failed to respond to her about financial hardship and gave her no help navigating a process she had told them she did not understand. Not one of those 10 funds had set a target for how long a death benefit claim should take. Not one of them was measuring it end to end.
The regulator has been raising this publicly since 2018. It wrote to fund chief executives in 2024, warning about consistently weak trustee practices. It published the File Review in 2025 with 34 recommendations attached. It sued the 2 largest offenders. And in June this year, it published a follow-up, checking what 45 trustees had actually done. Internal complaints about death benefit delays had fallen by 53%, which is real progress and worth saying. But the number of claims finished inside 6 months had improved by 3%. 3. Meanwhile, claim volumes rose 10% in the 12 months to October 2025, and they will keep rising because the generation with the largest super balances in Australian history is now the generation that is dying. Of the 10 trustees under the closest review, 5 had not identified a single systemic problem in their own complaints data. At least 1 had not analysed its complaints data at all. The regulator's own word for that was baffling. So here is the question I want to leave open, because it is the one the rest of this hangs on. Every one of these things is legal. The 17% is legal. The discretion is legal. The 3-year lapse is legal. Somebody wrote each of those rules down and somebody signed them. So who and when and why has none of it changed? There are 3 ways out of that tax, and I want to take them one at a time, because what happens when you try them is not what you would expect. The first is to convert the taxable part of your balance into the tax-free part while you are alive. You withdraw money you are entitled to withdraw, then put it back in as an after-tax contribution. It is legal, it is common, and the cap for this financial year is $130,000 a year, or up to $390,000 if you bring 3 years forward. It also stops working the day you turn 75. Most people find out about it after that. The second is to simply take the money out before you die and give it to your children as an early inheritance. Australia has no inheritance tax, so cash handed over while you are alive arrives clean. This works beautifully if you know when you are going to die. If you do not, and most people do not, you have moved your retirement savings out of the one structure built to fund your retirement. The third is to route the benefit through your estate instead of straight to your children, which drops the rate from 17% to 15% because the Medicare levy does not apply. 2% of $1 million is $20,000, so it is not nothing. It also opens the money up to anyone who might contest your will. And if you own your home outright tonight, and you have been listening to all of this as somebody else's misfortune, here is the part that should change how you hear it. Every one of those 3 doors requires you to act while you are healthy, informed, and under 75. The whole system is built on the assumption that you already know. Nobody at your fund is required to tell you, and by the survey's own numbers, 2/3 of them have not. This was not bad luck, and it was not an accident of drafting.
The tax office publishes the rules plainly, and has for years. It sets out exactly who counts as a dependent, exactly what happens to the taxable component, and it recommends that you check your nominated beneficiary at least once a year. That advice sits on a government website that almost nobody visits, and there is no requirement anywhere that your fund put it in front of you. The funds chose the paper form, the 2 witnesses, and the 3-year expiry, and then chose not to remind you. The law let them keep the discretion. The government has been consulting on whether to impose mandatory timeframes for paying a claim, and the fund's own body has argued those timeframes should not apply to the complicated cases, which are precisely the cases where families wait years. So the money you spent 40 years building can be taxed at 17% on the way out, paid to a person you did not choose, and held for 4 years while it happens. And every single step of that is somebody's decision, taken in a room, written down, and left alone. So what does this actually mean for your family? There are 3 versions. The best case is that you have a valid, current, binding nomination. Your balance is mostly tax-free component, or it is going to your spouse, and your fund is one of the ones that has fixed its processes. Your family is paid inside a few months and pays little or no tax. This is entirely achievable, and it costs you 1 afternoon. The realistic case, on the survey's own numbers, is the one most Australian families are in tonight. No binding nomination, or a lapsed one. A balance that is almost entirely taxable component. Adult children as the intended beneficiaries. That family loses 17% off the top and waits somewhere between 4 months and a year while a trustee decides whether the people named on the form are legally entitled to anything. The worst case is Brooke Allen's. The money goes to somebody the deceased did not intend. The decision is lawful, and the only appeal is to a complaints authority that will usually find the fund followed the rules. 14 months, $130,000, and nothing anyone can do about it afterwards. There are 4 things worth doing, and none of them require a financial advisor. Ring your fund and ask one question. Do I have a binding death benefit nomination? And if I do, what is its expiry date? Not whether you have a beneficiary listed. The word that matters is binding. If the answer is no, or nobody can tell you, ask them to post you the binding nomination form and ask whether they offer a non-lapsing one, because some funds do, and it never expires. Ask your fund for the split between your tax-free and taxable components. It is on your statement, and most people have never looked at it. That number, times 17%, is what your children will pay. And if you are under 75 and you have room to move, that is the window in which anything can be done about it. After 75, the main door closes. Do it before Christmas. Not because anything happens at Christmas, but because a form that needs 2 witnesses and a stamp is a form that sits on the kitchen table for 11 months. You did everything you were told to do. You worked, you contributed, you left it alone. You watched the balance grow, and you assumed that at the end of it, the money went to the people you love. For a great many Australian families, it will not. And the reason is a form nobody sent you, and a rule nobody mentioned. So tell me below, when you rang your fund, what did they say? Did you have a binding nomination, or did you find out you did?